So hi, good morning everyone. Welcome to the product webinar session. I'm Shruti Mishra. I'm managing all the GCC initiative in nasscom. So a very special welcome to each and every one of you. Your presence here is truly appreciated. So here is a small context about why we are doing this webinar, why product management is important for the GCCs. So these webinars are useful for people in the GCC because it's important nowadays to keep update with the changes and how products are managed. So they help people learn and stay updated with the new skills. So this is the second in the series of webinar, and today's topic is navigating market complexity, a product manager's guide, where we gonna talk about marketing understanding, white space identification, pricing, and positioning. So now I would like to welcome our panelists for today's webinar. Rajeev Gollapudi, Chief Product Manager, SAP Labs India Private Limited. Nripendra Singh, Vice President, Product Management, Global Service, Fiserv. And Arun Iyer, Head of Product Management, Finuit. So I will hand it over to you, Arun.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shruti and Rajeev Nripendra, and thank you to all of the participants for joining today. This is part of an ongoing series of webinars to demystify product management held by nasscom, and thank you so much, nasscom, for inviting us to the panel. Let's jump right into it. I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves very quickly in a couple of lines, and then we'll unpack the topics or the agenda for the day, which is white space identification and pricing. Hi, Rajeev. Good morning.
Good morning. All right. So my name is Rajeev. I'm working for SAP, based out of Bangalore. Been with this company for 17 years now, and all through in product management space. So I'm really excited to be here. Also associated with nasscom on a couple of initiatives, the product management mentoring program, as well as the PM 201 curriculum, which I'm really excited about, where we are trying to create a curriculum to help product managers grow into this role, especially take the next step from their initial years into product management, right? So really excited to be here and looking forward for the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajeev. We'll quickly move to Nripendra next. Good morning, Nripendra.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. Good to be here, and thanks to nasscom for putting this format together. Let me do this. I'll briefly introduce the firm, and then I'll introduce myself as well, right? So Fiserv as an organization is a global leader in payments and financial technology, and we cover a wide gamut of products and services, which includes core banking, digital banking solutions, credit and debit card issuer processing, payments network services, and merchant acquiring and processing. And just from a scale standpoint, and it feels great to talk about that because it gives us an opportunity that we have at hand in making a difference in how we move money. We serve almost 10,000 financial institutions, 6 million plus merchant locations across 100 countries, and 1.4 billion global accounts on file. Specifically on my role, I have been with the firm for almost 4+ years right now. I head the product management function in our product engineering and architecture center in India, which is Fiserv Global Services. And product managers or product leaders on my team work across a spectrum of financial services products. Right? So that's brief about the firm, brief about my intro. And I am partnering with Rajeev as well on the PM 201 comprehensive training content. I think it will, once it comes out, it will be one of the best resources available for beginners as well as practitioners. Right? So that's in short about me, Arun.
Great. Thank you so much, Rajeev and Nripendra. I'll take a quick minute to introduce myself as well. My name is Arun Iyer. I have been a product management and product leader for a long time, 12 or 13 years now. I have worked both with large companies and GCCs, Microsoft and McKinsey, as well as homegrown Indian startups, Ola. And last, I was with a startup incubated under the Bajaj Fiserv group for their healthcare tech domain. I currently lead product management for Quantrium, which is an AI/ML document understanding based SaaS product startup. Apart from this, I've been associated with nasscom for nearly 3 or 4 years now. I lead their mentorship track or mentorship charter, which is part of the nasscom product skills program. And I'm also a visiting professor for product management at several universities, including IIM Calcutta, IIM Trichy, and so on. Great to have the panel here, and let's dive right into it. Today, we will be speaking about how product managers, how the role, what the role of a product manager is in a GCC. GCC is standing for Global Capability Centers, which are essentially Indian arms or Indian wings of large multinational firms, often based out of the US or the Europe. So they have as you might have noticed in the last 10 or 15 years, the presence of such firms and such global capability centers across India in several IT hubs has increased tremendously. And the roles have evolved in the last few years, and there's a significant presence of product managers in the GCCs. So we'll take a look at what the role of a product manager is in GCCs, how it is likely to evolve in the upcoming years, with a specific focus on white space identification and pricing. Right. So Rajeev, Nripendra, just before we dive into that, Rajeev, you said you've worked with SAP for over 17 years now, and as a product manager throughout. Did you move into your role of product management with SAP, or were you a non-product manager before this?
Yeah, so the SAP was my first stint into product management. So before that, I was an engineering manager at Oracle in India, and before that, I was in IBM in the US for a few years. So definitely product management directly in joining into SAP. I was finishing my MBA at IIM Bangalore, and I thought I should move into a more business-centric role, and that's where I was looking for something, and then moved into SAP as a product manager.
Absolutely. And Rajeev, you would have seen, I mean, 17 years ago, product manager, even today, it is not very well understood. 17 years ago, I'm sure it was very, very ill understood by SAP itself, and definitely the community at large. So we will want to hear your thoughts on how you have seen product management as a discipline evolve, and especially within SAP, within a GCC, how that has evolved. Nripendra, you have been with Fiserv for the last 4.5 years, and as leading the product management team there. Again, question to you: how, compared to your previous experience, what has product management in GCC been like?
Yeah, so I think, Arun, as you rightly said, I mean, the understanding of the role itself from a product management standpoint, how the role has evolved, how these organizations have understood over a period of time in terms of how you can do it across, multi-location. All of this, has been a good amount of, has gone through a good amount of evolution, right? Now, for my role is specifically, if you think about it, I have done multiple roles in my career, right? I was a business consultant where I used to go around and help global firms design their products, whether in the digital space or whether in the core processing space when it comes to financial technology, right? Post that, I did a long stint as an engineering leader. Now that helps you to understand the multiple dynamics of, in terms of, how you define what you need to take to the market, and then how you build it, and then how you really, and then go ahead and implement it, and then pivot based on how things progress, right? It also gives you a very good global perspective, right? Now, in my role at Fiserv, and then the right way to look at a GCC, and I'll solicit a comment from Rajeev as well. But if you right way to look at GCC is that GCC is typically a microcosm or a function of all of your business units and product lines that you sell across the globe, right? And in different roles, right? So you do, the erstwhile business analysis as a function. Then you do, a lot of engineering as a function. You do a lot of implementation as a function, and all of that is in one roof, right? Now, it would be a great miss from a GCC to not capitalize on this wealth of talent and knowledge, right? And that too under one roof, and not really build a product management function that kind of hovers around this entire capability, right? And really helps you build in a GCC and promote and sell it globally, right? So and you can do it and not even going into the cost aspects of it, but you can do it really fast, right? You can really solve a lot of problems, right? So this global delivery value chain in terms of all kind of functions, GCC is really a right place to do it, right? So,
absolutely.
I think I agree also to what Nripendra is saying, right? So the maturity of let's say a GCC also matters, right? So there is a maturity curve in terms of when they get started. They're probably thinking, okay, here is a location. I would just like to tap into the talent here, which is readily available. But then slowly, as Nripendra mentioned, it grows into a microcosm of the overarching organization. I mean, if you take SAP, for example, we now have a representation of all our product portfolios being developed here in this lab, right? So we have the full breadth of understanding of what we can do. Specifically on the product management, what I also saw, I mean, you asked Arun also in terms of how it has evolved in the last 17 years, for example, right? One thing which also helped in the growth of the function of product management also is the growth of the market, right?
Right.
So we are sitting here in Asia, right? So in India specifically. So the growth of the market and the importance of this market for SAP has also improved in the last 17 years. So now we are not only sitting next to a huge development pool of resources who are then developing our products, but on the other hand, also closer to the market, right? An important market segment, which is right next door to us, and tapping into that and bringing that to the table when it comes to product decisions, right, was a great way to actually establish ourselves as product managers here in India, right? And I think that's
Absolutely.
when you can really make a difference, right? Otherwise, you're just looking up to your headquarters to actually get your input saying that, hey, this is what we want to do. But now we are able to bring, market inputs, an important market like Asia, and that gives us a seat at the table to really make those big decisions and also take ownership of the products, which I think is an important topic, which has also evolved over a period of time, right? So we are now having true ownership of end-to-end product portfolios, based out of India, for example.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's very heartening to find several very large multinationals actually show commitment to the GCC in India. As Cisco, for example, had
Yeah.
declared several years ago that they essentially have a second headquarters in Bangalore. I think it is definitely the same with Microsoft, a combination of Hyderabad and Bangalore and so on. So as Rajiv definitely said, the Indian subcontinent, probably Southeast Asia, is very different. Probably, 15, 20 years ago, several of the companies used to think the playbooks that would apply in the rest of the world could directly translate to India. And then they learned that no, a lot of local knowledge and local expertise is necessary. So it's important to rely on the local Indian talent and Indian expertise. Also, it's definitely the hotspot for growth. India is the only major economy that's growing at a tremendous rate compared to the rest of the world, at least in the last couple of years. So definitely a lot of focus from the GCCs when it comes to India, right? Now, for the panelists who are on the call and so on, as they explore product management, maybe they refer to material. Say they would read Marty Kagan's Inspired or other such groundbreaking books, and those tend to give a view that, hey, a product manager is actually a CEO. They need to look at everything from market discovery through need identification, through solutioning, through prioritizing solutions, testing out what solution will work with a low cost experiment, working with delivery and engineering teams to build that out, taking that to market, A/B testing, looking at metrics, pivoting and learning from mistakes and so on, but also doing marketing internally as well, selling to your boss, saying that, hey, this is something that we need to build. That looks like that on one side, and on the other side, there is often this sense of what should I say, alienation, or when someone bluntly asks you, hey, you're a product manager at this place, what does a product manager do exactly? And you don't really have a good answer to it, right? So let's kind of explore what the entire value chain of product managers is, or what product management is, and specifically how does it apply to a GCC. So what are the key points that a product manager should focus on, and how does it apply in a GCC? Rajiv, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, from the way I look at it, and I broadly put it into two buckets for the entire value chain, right? So it's like inbound versus outbound, right? So the way I look at product management is always, okay, inbound is where you're trying to bring market requirements and then work with your development organization to actually deliver them, to test them, to make sure they're developing the right thing, and so on and so forth. Whereas outbound is more, like what you mentioned, working with the sales, pre-sales, and customers in the ecosystem to actually take the product to the market and make sure it's successful, right? So this is, we see various, let's say, sub roles within the umbrella of product management evolving now. Naturally, in a GCC where there is a lot of development capacity, a lot of inbound roles are more popular or larger in terms of numbers as well, whereas the outbound facing or pure outbound type of roles are much lesser. It's also changing, as I mentioned before, with the Asia market, etc. But purely because of the fact that we are sitting next to development organization, we see a lot of inbound type of roles here in GCC, which is natural, right? And which also means that a lot of these roles are evolving from, or the people who are coming into these roles are coming more from a development and engineering background, right? Whereas, for a more outbound type of roles, you would need more of this customer experience, like Nripendra mentioned, with respect to having that experience of actually building something with the customers, taking things to the customer, working with the market, understanding the market dynamics, and so on and so forth. That requires, that is more on the outbound side of things, which is evolving. So if I look at SAP in India, for example, we have predominantly inbound facing product managers, or sometimes called as product owners, and so on and so forth in the Scrum and all these agile methodologies, etc. Whereas more go-to-market facing, regional go-to-market type of roles are also evolving, where we see the need to actually work with the local market and then take our products to the market, right? So we do see the full spectrum, but a little bit tilted more towards the inbound side, purely from the GCC point of view here in India. Yeah.
Got it. So yes, you probably defined it as there's an inbound role and outbound role. Inbound role is kind of getting requirements, figuring out what we need to do, and outbound is once we do it, how do you take it out back into the market and so on. And as you said, the tilt is more towards the inbound role right now in India, and that is changing as we speak, especially as GCCs recognize that that Indian talent is amazing, and they learn, they are very adaptive, and can definitely fit into any part of the world. Nripendra, your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, so I think very relatable to what Rajeev said, and I'll point out a couple of key things, and also what the product managers or product owner roles in the GCC should carefully think about as they go go through the life cycle of product development. Right now, from an experience standpoint, if you think about it, discovery, when it comes to discovery as from a overall value chain standpoint, right? The market research and customer understanding piece, right? Where product managers in India can very significantly contribute, right? My experience from a talent market in India has been that we have product managers with global thinking. Right. When I say global thinking, people have exposures to a lot of global firms, and if you look around our overall market, every global firm has a representation in India, right? So I don't think we have any lack of product leaders with global thinking as such, right? So if you go through the entire value chain, and from a discovery standpoint, if you look at market research and understanding of your customer, whether it is a the user persona or a buyer persona or a buyer experience, all of that, the leaders here can put it together in a quite professional way, right? So that chasm, I think we have actually crossed, right? In my mind and in my experience, right? Now, as you go through the process in terms of your definition of your product roadmap, your definition of your MVPs, right? And then designing your MVPs around your go-to market, right? That skill is also pretty much in place. You have to polish and kind of create a finesse around it to make sure that it is in the context of the product, right? But that in terms of your definition of your strategy, in terms of how you build your product, how you define your MVPs, is also falling in place now, right? Specifically, if you look at product owner roles when you go to the next level of your value chain in terms of your product development and testing, whether it is internal testing or external testing, there are certainly you have in GCC world, you have a large engineering workforce, so you can really own the end-to-end product development, right? From a product owner or product manager role, right? From a testing standpoint, depending on the type of product that you are building, right? You have multiple tools to do your A/B testing, your persona based testing, and all of that, which you can actually run it from here. Right now, when you look at the next two phases, which is marketing, sales, and tracking your product metrics, Sales and marketing is certainly a market function. You can very well support it with the collaterals and client presentations and things like that, but it is essentially primarily a market function with event-based marketing and things like that that has to be done in the market. Tracking how your product is performing is another critical element, which if it is tool based, you can I mean it's not really a geo based function, right? So you can very well do it across location, right? So that's how I visualize the entire value chain and what functions you can do, what functions you cannot do, right? If I can take 10 more seconds, I want to really emphasize on as we go through the product development life cycle, right? Our typical line of thinking is we or the most important component is that we need to really focus on problem identification and problem definition. That's where I think we need to take the next set of leap very very clearly, rather than completely because I think entire product value chain in terms of product development is we have mastered. I think there are not a lot of questions around that, right? But if you look at problem identification in itself, right, typically when you position a product, what I have seen, you go through a feature, then you go through the benefits of a feature, and then you somehow tie it to the market problem, right?
Right.
It should actually be absolutely reverse, where you define the problem, really understand the problem in deep, define the capabilities around that problem, that your product that you're trying to build, and then when you build and then you tie the features to it, that way you are actually well positioned for the rest of your delivery value chain, whether it is positioning your product, whether it is thinking about pricing your product, whether it is thinking about how your battle cards and marketing collateral should look like, right? So this is one thing that I wanted to emphasize for the audience to really focus on. The first thing to get started is your understanding of the problem. That will actually connect you with the global stakeholders also really, really well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Nripendra. And you mentioned, both Rajeev and Nripendra have focused on what we call white space identification, or essentially problem identification. Where is there a need in the market for which we can develop some solution, right? And you could try different solutions, see which one fits best, and so on. The other part is pricing, which you just mentioned in passing. We'll come back to that in a moment. But let's take a look to explore white space identification in a little more detail in two contexts. So in a GCC, for a product manager who's, say, recently moved to a GCC or recently moved across teams and essentially is just kind of starting out on a product in a GCC, there are two. I'm sure people would be reading books like, say, Continuous Discovery Habits, right? So the engineering side of things already has frameworks like CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment. For a product manager, the converse could be continuous discovery and continuous delivery. So how do you keep discovering what are the new problems in the market, and how do you keep delivering solutions that will try to plug those problems, right? So if you think about it in that, and let's break it into two markets. One is the India-focused market, where the product manager themselves are in the location. It's probably much easier to access those customers, even talk to the sales team and so on. And there is the remote market, which is often the primary market that the global headquarters of the company is trying to serve, right? So if you, any thoughts on how a product manager in India, in a GCC, could address the the white space identification for these two separate markets, an India or an Asia focused market versus a global market? Rajeev, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic, right? So what Nripendra also mentioned, that's one of the differentiating factors, or also shows the maturity of the function, right? So if you really want to make your presence felt, I think you need to really handle this particular topic. I like the term continuous discovery, actually, which is important. I would like to distinguish between two types of discovery, right? So one is, of course, if you want to try to introduce new products, like new product introduction, right? Where you're really looking at a full white space, something that the market has not seen yet, or at least as a company, you have not developed something underserved area. That has its own, paradigm. And this is where I think in the new product introduction, especially in the region, right? So if there's something that needs to be served here in the region, for example, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, or even Australia, New Zealand, or India, classic examples would be all localization topics, right? For example, if there's something to do with GST, we are coming from the ERP world, so something has to be done with GST, that has to be done in India, right? So these would be the easier examples of finding out those white spaces and then developing it because there is a localized need, right? But what is still missing is, building in India for the world, if I can say that, right? So wherein you're trying to innovate, which introduce new products, which are let's say relevant for the global market as well. I mean, you could ideate here and develop the prototypes here, etc., but then you're thinking about the global market. That is still a big gap, if I can say that. I mean, in the sense that we are making some headways into it. We have a few examples here and there, but still building global relevant new products is something that is not yet happening. On the other side of the thing is continuous improvement or continuous discovery, especially in the cloud world where we have a lot of these cloud products. We obviously have the opportunity to improve them much more rapidly than, let's say, a few years ago, where we have, let's say, our software releases which are going once in a year, once in 2 years kind of releases. Now we have monthly, and in some of our products we even have daily releases, right? So which means that we have an opportunity to innovate that much more faster, which essentially means for a product manager that they need to be able to figure out those gaps or white spaces or improvement opportunities, right, by constantly getting user feedback. And with the cloud, we have that opportunity to actually observe the user behavior, get direct feedback from the actual users of the product, use all of that data to actually become data driven in terms of finding those improvement areas, right? So new product introduction has a completely different approach, and there we are seeing some headways. But on the continuous improvement side of things, we see a lot of improvements. We see many of, I mean, even here in Labs India, we see many product managers completely being data driven, getting that feedback from the actual users, and then be able to deliver those newer features on a regular basis much more easily, right? So this is what I see. I think there's a lot of work that we can do on the new product introduction side from India, from GCCs. Whereas on the continuous improvement side, we have, let's say, some tools, support, and processes in place which are helping us to directly react to user feedback much more, at a rapid pace. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we will come to the kind of tension between new product introduction versus continuous improvement of an existing product and how it is perceived, especially by a person who's for their own resume, right, or even for the company's resume. So we will come to that in a moment. Let's just turn to Nripendra and get his thoughts on, again, a similar question, which is a product manager in a GCC in India. How do they balance discovery of needs? It's obviously easier in the local region. You have access to local resources, local sales teams, and so on, versus having a view of a white space discovery for the world, for global geographies, where it's probably harder for the product manager to travel very frequently and meet with a bunch of customers on a longer term basis. So how do you balance this?
Yeah, but before I get into responding to your question, Arun, I love the term, the new definition of CI/CD. So I will use it in every other discussion. But with that being,
CI/CD is, I mean, just to clarify that CI/CD is for engineers, integration and delivery,
I get
whereas
it. Yeah. I get
discovery
it.
and delivery for product managers. Absolutely.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with that being said, I think very real answer from Rajeev. So let me focus specifically on what you asked me, right? So if you look at it from a white space identification and primarily from a new product development, right? And then bring the GCC context into it, right? If you see, you can't really, you are a very valuable part of a global organization, right? That has markets, and for Fiserv, it is like 100 countries that we serve, right? So it is truly global, in terms of the markets that we have access to, right? Now, with that being, said, right, the for any organization, you have to have a set of frameworks in place, right, where the product organizations or product leaders, if your primary market is US, right, or Europe, or UK, right, your product leaders in that market and product leaders in India have to be very seamlessly connected, right? These are not two different organizations, right? So they have to be very seamlessly connected, right, through the through a formal framework. I'm not even saying,
Right.
in a loosely defined framework, right? In a very formal framework, right? So if there is a
Right.
merchant acquisition or a, merchant processing business, you should have, product leaders in the primary market and product leaders who are part of the GCC, tightly integrated. Right now, when you do that, what happens is, you are part of the function or the process where the new product discovery, that happens, right? If I'm not going to say it is going to be seamless, but you are part of all kind of go-to-market strategies that are getting built, right? And you have awareness of that, right? You have a view of what globally product leaders are thinking in terms of what are the gaps that we need to address, right? And
Right.
this could be gaps in an existing product, this could be gaps against a competition, this could be a new market that new market or a new area that I want to tap into. You have all those views in terms and projections around that and all that, right? So that gives you enough room to be able to start thinking through and then working through, pick up few areas or pick up one or two areas and then start thinking through and working through what kind of product solutions will actually work. Right now, some of it may actually fall into the continuous improvement space itself, right?
Right.
Where GCC can be extremely powerful and useful in fast tracking it, implementing it, because as we said in the beginning, it's a microcosm of, as you mature, it's a microcosm of most of the business units and product lines, right? So you have all the information at your hand, you have access to all
Right.
the tools and applications in the system, right? You can look at user feedback through any kind of tools that you use, right? And these are and you don't have to run a lot of Google Analytics and all that for that. The as simple as your ticket repository will tell you what's going on, right? So coming back to my point, what I'm saying is that for enabling your continuous discovery and white space identification, having frameworks that integrate global orgs is extremely important, right? Formalized frameworks in that space, right, are extremely important. And then how do you follow through some of that, right? So very something very unique in terms of how we run our annual innovation programs, and these are not like these are very, very prized, and how we organize them in a very limited group and all of that, right? So, and we call it essentially business innovation group in terms of how we integrate both the organizations, and then we run that, right? So that helps us in new product discovery in a very defined framework format, right? So, and then when you come to continuous improvement, I think Rajeev explained it also. I don't have to kind of repeat it, but essentially GCC is the right place to run those and run those very, very efficiently.
Right. Thank you so much. I mean, I think with both of you have triggered a lot of thoughts. In fact, I'm just taking a minute to write them down so that I don't forget them, and we will go into them in a moment. So yeah, let's just start off with the first one. So building in India for the world, right? Especially innovations. So as Rajeev and Nripendra both mentioned that that the outbound phase or the outbound part of product management still needs a lot of development, still needs a lot of growth. There is work happening there. Let's take a very concrete example of, say, and this is a very often quoted story of cash on delivery, right? Started with Flipkart, Amazon innovated it on so on. Cash on delivery was not something that was required for global markets a lot. The need was discovered in India, the solution built and plugged and whatnot for India, and now it's been exported to the rest of the world, and it's working fine there. It's in there. In fact, the rest of the world also does use cash on delivery for products like Amazon, right? For Amazon's delivery logistics. Like that, could you reflect on some of your personal experiences or experiences in the global, in the wider industry, where you have examples of how discovery and innovation has been driven from GCCs in India? Rajeev, would you like to take a stab?
Yeah, I think when I look at, let's say, complete new products that have been introduced and which were initially tried out here and then made global, there are two things that come up. I mean, first I mentioned already, which is more localization topics, right? So something that you did here related to taxes, maybe that's relevant for another country, we take it over there. But what we've also seen is some industries which are more cutting edge or more, coming forward for adopting new technologies. And many years ago, we developed something in the oil and gas industry, right, for an ERP solution for oil and gas industry. A lot of that was actually incubated here in labs and then we made that solution work for the oil and gas companies here in India, and then we took it to the globe as well, right? So there are examples like that where a particular industry, for example, or a set of customers who would, want to innovate, who've thought beyond what was normally possible, and we built that for those set of customers and then took it to the globe, right? And these things happen time and again. And going back to Nripendra's point about this org structure, where we have this global and local, or GCC, product managers and the global product managers almost meshed with each other, that we don't actually find the difference between them, right? Has actually helped in building more and more of these, right? So now it is not so much that we are only thinking that what can we do only for India, but this whole global thinking has started coming in, and we are able to do more of that as well, right? What is also another interesting thing is the adoption of technology trends, right? Which is also triggering new product introduction. Classic example is the last 1 year. I mean, before the call, we were already talking about ChatGPT and OpenAI and generative AI, for example, right? Something like that coming in, and especially in India, we have this strength of, being very adaptive to anything that is coming new, right? So we are not stuck up on saying that, hey, I'm a Java programmer, so I will only do that and I will not do anything else, right? We're very, very flexible, and that's a huge strength of ours. When something like generative AI came along, right? I mean, the amount of enthusiasm the people here in India and in labs in India for SAP have shown, and how they have picked up, and then, in a matter of weeks, we came up with 100 different ideas of how we can leverage generative AI capabilities within our products, right? So I think these this is a classic example of where, a new technology comes along, which disrupts a little bit in terms of what you can do or cannot do. And then a GCC, especially a GCC in India, having that strength of being able to adapt to it quickly, right, really gives us an advantage to actually, build things. And when we are building things now with generative AI, it's not just for the India market or whatever, it's obviously for global solutions as well, right? And I think this was really heartening to see. I mean, at least I witnessed it firsthand for the first time, where something like this came along, and then suddenly we have so many, literally hundreds of developers and enthusiasts who came along just in a matter of months to come up with ideas and even productized it, right? And then we are now able to deliver that to the market as well on a global scale. So I think that is a great strength. And some set of customers who are visionary, who are ready to innovate with us, also helped us build things for India, which we could take to the globe as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Since you mentioned ChatGPT, a quick anecdote that in a previous company, the CPO had asked a product manager to write a spec for a certain feature. Yeah. Young chap, barely 25 years old, the product manager, I mean, he told the CPO, I'll write the spec in 1 day. So he told the CPO, yeah. So the CPO said, look, it's not that simple. You're gonna need over a week to write it properly and get it ship shape. So no problem, boss. I'll get it written in 1 day. And he just gave the problem statement to ChatGPT, which wrote out a spec. And the surprising thing is the engineers are okay with the spec. They said this is good enough for us to get working with it. So then, the CPO was mature enough to realize, okay, why should I interfere in this process? So long as the product manager is producing something which the engineering team is fine with, why should I care, right? So things are working fine. So you're absolutely right that especially the new young talent is very adaptable. They know how to use the tools that are available to them. And I would say, and I might be showing my age a bit here, that the slightly older people, the seniors, tend to deplore that and say, hey, you're not going through the paces like we did when we were young. But how do you care, so long as the work is moving on and they develop other skills that probably I don't have? And it's like, for example, I don't know how to use a slide rule or a log table to calculate the logarithm of a number. Someone else might say, hey, you're a kid, you don't know how to do this. But it's not required now. Today, Excel or a calculator will do that for me, right? So it's very interesting how these newer tools are being used. Moving on to Nripendra, especially since he's spoke about how global teams and local teams are tightly integrated, I would really like to get into the actual tactical details and the mechanics of that. I reflect on my work with Microsoft, where we had literally a person called as a Sherpa. Just like Sherpas help a mountaineer climb up a difficult mountain, and that was literally K2. The project it was called K2 and not Mount Everest, because though Mount Everest is taller, K2 is apparently much harder to climb. it's also in enemy territory. So it's harder to climb, much worse weather conditions and so on. We had a project that was a very tight deadline and other external factors. So the Sherpa from each team, whether globally or locally, would meet each other maybe even twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and try to understand what are the requirements of the customer, what are the requirements of delivery, are there any bottlenecks or any concerns that need to be fires that need to be fought on an urgent basis, and so on. So that also, for example, evens out the view that happens with global teams, where the time zones are also aligned. I think that has moved on a lot in the last 10 years. But earlier, it was the case that either India is suffering from late night calls all the time, or one way or the other. And I think now both teams realize that, hey, they need to accommodate each other's time zones and so on and so on when they set up these calls. So Nripendra, any specific, very tactical examples? They would be really small. They could be literally as simple as calling someone a Sherpa and say, hey, your job is to talk to the other team day in and day out all the time. You represent the customer for us as the India team. Any tips that you would have on those?
Yeah. So I think good question, Arun, and and I may have a different view from a Sherpa, rule, but I'll articulate what has what has worked well, right? So if you look at the industry evolution, especially after 2010, right? The advent of all of these SaaS platforms, right? Uh, they kind of removed that notion of that you have to build it in one place and then market it there, and you can't really do it outside of the primary market, right? So, and we have many examples in the geography, right? So what I'm trying to say is that one is evolution of talent, evolution of your delivery methodology, right, and evolution of technology, all of this coming together, right, and a lot of access to data, right, all of this coming together has blurred the geographies, first of all, right, and it has matured the thinking process also, right. Now coming back to your older versus younger, right, if I have to just talk about myself, right, I have personally changed my line of thinking from no idea is a bad idea, right? And then I'm not saying generically, what I'm trying to say is that, everything that people bring together, is possible actually, and is actually possible, right? And use, right. And you have to just look around and see what you have in your own systems, what you may want to partner with, and then you can actually build it, right? But coming specifically to the point in terms of your, leading to the point where, from an organization model standpoint, right? Agile has done a lot of favor to us as well, where there is absolute transparency, in terms of all your collaboration tools that are there from how information is shared, right? And nobody anymore wants to do a duplication of role, right? So if say for example I have somebody who's sitting in the market next to the entire global product teams and some engineering leaders and all of that, and that person translates it back to the team in India so that everybody is in sync and all of that, that's almost completely gone, right? Right, it's almost vanished, especially in the GCC world. That doesn't survive at all, right? So you're part of the
alternative then?
Yeah, so there isn't really an alternative, right? So you have, say for example, you have to define your time zones in which you will work, right? So for example, you will, to be very tactical, right, you will work, say for example 12 p.m. or noon to, say for example 10 p.m., right? So that you provide a good overlap, right? Number one, right? Number two, you should have access to the same product roadmap. You should have access to the same Jira board. You should have access to same Confluence pages, and you should have so there isn't really a certainly what will happen is that there will be some business case meetings that will happen in the USRs, right? You can't really completely cover for that, right? So there will be some information that you will miss, but that will not be more than 30%, right? There will be some decisions that will be made that you may not know, but what will happen is your hurdles and your scrums, right? And I'm not going into scrums of say for example your engineering or development itself, right? Within your product you will have scrums where you can have all that information shared, right? And it is done practically right now, right? So that way your inefficiency due to lack of information completely goes away, right? Plus Arun, one other very critical element is the kind of talent that you hire for these roles, right? So and mostly when you hire the talent, right, the talent is adept in working in these kind of environments, right? Where you can run with a certain element of ambiguity, right? But you wouldn't want to duplicate your role with someone else, right? So that is another very, very critical element, right? So I'm hoping I'm answering your question, but having one or few defined roles that will transfer information from one place to the other place, interpret information from one place to the other place, that is not a very value added role anymore, right? So everybody in the chain has to add incremental value, right? So that we should be extremely conscious of, certain, and then this time zone overlap actually helps with that, right? That's the crux of the people from here run client meetings, right? People from and all of that is happening quite a bit now, right? So so client interface, then thinking of product ideas that you can then structure and position to the clients as beta products, right? All of that is essentially very critical, right? So, and all of that is possible and happens, Arun.
Got it. Thank you so much. I will. So I encourage the participants to please drop questions on the Q&A section or the chat section. We have Shruti and others on the NASScom team to help curate us, and we'll take some time at the end to answer those. I will quickly come back to a point that Rajeev mentioned in passing a few minutes ago, which was things like agile and cloud deployments, which allow teams to deploy very quickly, right? So one of the things that probably I've learned the hard way is if you ask a customer, hey, do you want this? He's going to say, yes, I want it. And then, or even if you ask them, what do you want? They might say, I want X, Y, and Z. And everything's super critical. Please build it. You put someone to, you ask your team member to build Y or Z, and they take 3 months to build it. And then when they give it to the client says, hey, right now we are doing our annual planning. Give me a couple of months. We'll come back to it later. And 2 months later, they say, we're going through an org restructuring and the VP has been moved to a different function or so on. Give me another couple of months. So on and so forth. The conversation goes on for 6 months before you realize this actually wasn't very important to them. They thought it was important. They thought they will use it. And when you actually build it for them, you find out they're not ready to use it. It's not really important for the organization right now. Something else was more important. The very ability to be able to iterate very quickly, that is, build something, give it to the client, see whether they use it, not just listen to what they say, see if it shows up on the metrics. Are people logging into that product? Are they using it at least 2 times a day? Are they complaining about it? Which is also a good thing. That means at least somebody's using it and then saying, it's not working for me. Please fix this, something or the other. Are very, very good tools that teams have at their disposals to do continuous discovery and continuous delivery, right? So we will take a quick couple of moments to speak about this and then move on to the other part of today's discussion, which is pricing. So any thoughts on this, Rajeev? How do you use actionable data inputs to reflect consumer behavior rather than only depend on qualitative inputs? Qualitative inputs are important, but we can't only depend on those.
No, now, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of tools and a lot of information available, right? A lot of data points available. The challenge now is to be able to create those insights, right? Where you can actually make some product decisions based on all the data points, because there is humongous amount of data that you can actually collect on user behavior and requirements. And like Nripendra mentioned, just looking at the ticketing tool, you would get a lot of insights on its own, right? What we also see is, many a times when we have these larger customers who have the loudest of their voices, right? So some of our big customers, they ask for something and then suddenly you will have to deliver because it's a very large customer and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of these how should I say, conflicting priorities that are coming your way. I mean, you're seeing these data points where you see a certain pattern and you see that something has to be done, whereas you have these large customers who are then saying, I need this particular feature and I'm the biggest customer of yours, you have to listen to me. I would say I just listened to a podcast 2 weeks ago. Somebody was mentioning what they call as vitamin N. Yeah, vitamin N is required. The ability to say no. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest skill that the product manager has to learn. No, not just to these large customers. Of course, that's very difficult, but also no to a lot of features, a lot of things that you're observing, because that's the art of prioritization, right? Which I think all product managers have to master. So I think if we are able to master the vitamin N and be able to say no properly with enough data backing us, I think we will be quite successful in managing this dichotomy, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really like the term vitamin N. And the whole point of prioritization, exactly as you say, Rajiv, is that it has to be hard. Saying that I'm going to prioritize building a new product over changing the color of the button is not really prioritization. You're not making a hard decision. The hard decisions has to be when a senior leader, a product manager, or a CPO or someone says that, hey, I really, really wish I could do this, but right now I really, really wish I could do X, but right now I recognize Y is even more important. So I'll make the hard decision to prioritize Y over X. Right? That's when you're prioritizing. Otherwise, it's just saying, okay, I really didn't care about this, so you can do it later, right? So that's not really prioritizing. So I think that's a that's a great input, and develop the strength to have vitamin N and not overdose on it and say no to everything, of course, right? Let's move to the second part of our discussion for today, which is on pricing, right? Pricing is a touchy topic, and a lot of product managers, a lot of engineering managers and engineering leaders typically stay away from pricing for multiple reasons. One, is just an icky topic that they probably don't want to get into. The other thing is they fear that focusing too much on pricing will lead to a race to the bottom. If my value proposition to the customer is, hey, I'm cheaper than my competitor, SAP, I know SAP doesn't do that, but say SAP or some ERP competitor comes and says, hey, we'll offer 70% of the value at 50% of the cost, right? Then it becomes a race to the bottom. The customer can play people off against each other, saying, hey, this guy is offering me a 30% discount. What can you offer me? Somebody else offers a 50% discount, and then you eat through your margins, and your CFO is in his fix, and they fire the whole team, right? So, what are some of the models that you would use for pricing? You can have SaaS-based subscription pricings, which are on the site, and you pick one of several plans and say, hey, I want to go with this plan. It could be a user-based plan, it could be a usage-based plan, it could be number of seats, or it could be something like a fixed monthly fee, like you play for a Netflix subscription and so on. Say, pay 500 rupees and don't worry about it anymore, right? So any thoughts on pricing and how product managers of GCCs in India can contribute to the pricing discussion?
Nripendra, you want to go first? I'll
No,
just follow you.
sure. Absolutely, Rajiv, I'll go first. Right. So, Arun, see, first of all, to your first, to the point that you made, I think as product managers, we should be completely aware of how the product is priced, right? Staying away or trying to think that while I'm part of GCC, this is not my area. There is finance department that is doing it. Our product leaders in the market are doing it. That's absolutely not the right approach, because you don't see, unless you know how your product is earning, and why the customer is paying for it, you wouldn't ever get to a sense of the value that your product offers, the real value of that the product offers, right? So it's extremely critical. So if the information is not directly available to you, work through the chain to get that information available to you, right? To an extent where you understand, right? So that's extremely critical, number one, right? Number two, see, if you look at pricing, per se, as to how you, in financial, setup, whether you do, a gross active account based pricing, whether you do number of transactions, based pricing, or you add, another. So you have to get to a point of where you can convert your pricing into meaningful units in which the customer can actually understand that, there is, there is the minimum that I need to really pay, right, for the value that I'm getting from the product. Plus, there is, a value add that I'm getting for which I need to pay incrementally, and there will be a different method of paying for that. Right. It will not be, it may be a specific fee. It may be an event-based fee, right? But so there are two or three core constructs, right? One, the unit-based pricing that you define to, and I'll take maybe 20, 30 more seconds to get to the point of that unit-based pricing, right? So one is your processing unit-based pricing, right? Which can increase based on your pricing, based on your if the number of units increase, right? So you have that benefit that you can get to that in a unit-based pricing, right? Number of customers increasing, number of transactions increasing, it helps in that perspective, right? But with that being said, large clients will have a different view. But not getting into the nitty-gritties of it, right? And then extremely important component of your pricing is the value add, because that essentially, and not value add trivializing the term as value add, there are massive value adds that the product provides, and how do you componentize it and how you price that as well, right?
Right.
So a very clear understanding of what value add to the customer ecosystem your product is providing, and what you can add on to it, right? It could be basis analytics, it could be basis detection of fraud, right? It could be so, and then you price those components adequately, right? They may
Right.
not be
Right.
unit based pricing, that may be event based pricing, or even the value of that entire ecosystem that helps the customer's business, right? So let me
I
take
would
a
even say softer aspects like a simpler UX, right? Is
yeah
value.
yeah
I mean, you
yeah
can't say I'll give you an ugly UX which still does some things like fraud detection. No, having a good UX is value.
Yeah, I mean the competition will not allow you to do it. I mean there is it's not an easy market ever, right? So
Right.
but let me come back to let me take a step back, right? See, it's very because if you're working on an existing product, or if you're working on so let's take an example of a new product, right? See,
Mhm.
if you having a very clear understanding of the value chain of your stakeholders, right? And so for example, who is your buyer, right? What are the different buyer personas, right? Who are going to use your product, right? Who is the end user, right? Where your product essentially fits in that entire ecosystem, right? And what value it offers to all the set of stakeholders, right? And that gives you a sense of that, if you say for example have absolutely reduced operational cost, that means
Right.
it has saved money for the for the institution, right? Or for the bank, right? If say for example you have helped in new customer acquisitions, right?
Right. Right.
So so if you as a product leader, you should have a very refined understanding of this vis-a-vis competitive research from a pricing standpoint takes its own time, right?
Yes,
So
it's very hard and
yeah,
very
it's
opaque.
very hard, opaque, and needs deep research, and you have to sift through a lot of information to come to a point, right? But coming
Right.
back to the specific that I'm trying to call out is that understanding your entire stakeholder value chain, what value your product has added to the entire value chain, and how the money movement versus today versus in the new world will change, that will get to you understanding the value of your product itself, right?
Right. Right.
Now how you price it over a period of time is more of a finance function in terms of what is the gestation period, what is the ROI period, and how many clients that you need to get to, and things like that, right? So that, but the clunk work is understanding the value that your product offers, right? And then you get to the different pricing frameworks, whether it is value-based pricing, whether it is skimming, whether it is penetration pricing, whatever the framework that you want to use, right? But
Right.
define the value first, right? I'll pause here and see if
Absolutely,
Rajeev has
absolutely. And Rajiv, you had also mentioned, and this typically happens, especially in B2B products. You have some large clients essentially demanding features, and it's as a senior leader, right? As a CPO or as a CEO, it's hard to say no to revenue, right? I myself have been in a situation where I had a request uh, from the sales team saying, "Hey, can we add Flappy Bird as a game to the app?" And I asked them, how does this fit in with anything? And why are you doing this? They said, this is just going to add engagement. And you can add YouTube videos as engagement if it comes. You can add, really crazy videos as engagement if you just want to do that. But does it fit in with your goal of, say, being a finance B2B, being a financial service provider, or being a healthcare provider or something like that? Why do you want to add Flappy Bird to it, right? So at some point of time, you need to speak back to the vision and the mission or the goals of the product and say, hey, is this aligned with that? Of course, I put myself in the position of the CEO and say, hey, this client is asking for this, and they're promising a ton of revenue. Why do you want me to say no to that, right? So Rajiv, also large clients, especially the ones who know they are powerful, will tend to squeeze very heavily when it comes to discounting and margins and so on and so forth, right? Now, this is typically a job for the sales team or the pricing team and the CFO to get in. But how would you advise product managers in general, and especially for product managers in GCC, to at least get in on the conversation?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short because I think there are some questions as well from the audience which we need to get to. From a GCC point of view, based on what Nripendra also said, right? I see an opportunity that we are in a price sensitive, or I would rather call it value sensitive market here, right?
Right.
Who are always demanding utmost value for the buck that they're paying, right? So we have an opportunity here in GCCs, especially in India, to work with the client base here in the region, right? To be able to articulate that value much better, right? And much finer, right? So I would encourage product managers to work with the local market units and with, leverage the proximity that we have with the market, and also the kind of market that we have, which, as I mentioned, is value sensitive, to be able to understand the pricing and the value aspects of the product much better. And that will help them, get that picture that Nripendra was painting, saying that you need to have that finer, granular understanding of the value that your product is delivering and the price. I mean, how is it priced and how is it received, etc. Right? I will pause at that for now. I mean, of course, we can go a little bit, as much as we want on that particular topic, especially with these large clients, etc., etc. But I think maybe we take some time to actually look at the questions that are then coming in from the audience.
Sure. So I see a lot of questions on the Q&A panel. Thank you so much, Rajeev and Nripendra, for the detailed discussion. We'll go through some of the questions that are on the Q&A panel. There are also some other very, very interesting questions on the webinar chat, which may be out of the scope of this particular discussion. You could definitely reach out to the NASScom coordination team and set up one-on-one calls with any of the three of us. We could help you.
Definitely.
Those. Let's take a couple of quick questions. Sorry. Yes.
I think, Arun, I can see one, very good question. What are the best ways to build feedback loops with customer who may not be user of product or platform?
Right. So there is I mean, when especially for complex B2B sales, there is a whole series of decision makers, right? So there is the final user of the product who interacts with the interface every day. There may be that person's management chain who need to approve, but they may not be interacting with the product management every day. And then there might be a procurement department or a purchasing department which works with vendors to procure the product. There's often the CFO who decides on pricing of the product and what should be the packaging, maintenance, and so on and so forth. For a B2B sale, it's often very complex. You have to speak to all of these different stakeholders before you actually land a client. So any thoughts on that, Rajeev and Nripendra?
Yeah, I think if I understood the question correctly, it's also about, customers or markets where we have not yet, who are not yet our customers, or in the sense that we have not addressed that market yet, right? And how do we get feedback from the customers who are not using our product, right? So that's how I read it. But I think market research is a topic of its own, right? Maybe that's something that we can pick up as a topic for an upcoming webinar also, because that's quite important. I would say there are multiple methods with respect to market research, competitive analysis, but also understanding the market with respect to various industries, various geographies, and so on and so forth. So we do that quite a bit whenever we identify a problem space, and then we would like to understand what is the feedback from a target customer base, for example. And of course, like what you mentioned, it's not just about the end users themselves, but there is a full spectrum of decision makers and buyer personas, etc., whom we need to consider as well in that research. But I think, I'll just leave it at that, to say that, hey, market research is something that we'll have to look at in detail to see what would be the best strategy given the product and the market space that you would like to address. Yeah.
Got it. I'll take two questions, probably combine them one to one, and have Nripendra also speak through that. So those questions are: what are the best frameworks for PMs and EMs to ensure that product decisions are effective? And related to that, how to recalibrate from decisions on product changes or reversals that are not yielding results? My quick take on this, and I'll defer to Nripendra after this, is that one, simplify. Product management is often presented as overcomplicated. Don't make it complicated unless you actually need to, right? So use a couple of frameworks or a couple of thumb rules. Maybe the RISE prioritization framework is all that you need to be able to prioritize decisions as one. And the second, iterate and let data inform your decisions, right? You make a decision, go ahead with it, run an experiment on a small set of customers or a small, anchor customer, see how their reception to your feature or your market is, and then use that to revise your decisions and refine your decisions. Nripendra, any thoughts on those?
Yeah, so I think, sure, Arun. So I think one part of it is, and I think you addressed it well, Arun, by the way. So there is a NASScom webinar that I had gone through, which clearly outlines the list of, and RISE is one of them, in terms of how do you really go about prioritizing, right? So that is, so I think worth looking at that. If, Shruti, you have access, you can share it in the link. I think that's worth looking at. It was very nicely, it has very nicely articulated, right? Number one. Number two, so there are two quick elements, right? One, when you are really when you have a list of capabilities that you want to, and I'm trying to avoid features, as a terminology, right? If you have a list of capabilities that you want your product to have, right? The absolute, and when you are the product manager and you're working in the product, I mean, a lot of times we kind of get a little bit strayed in terms of having our biases that the product should definitely have this, the product should definitely have this, competition certainly has this, right? A very important understanding of what your client base or target client base is, number one, right? And for a foreseeable future, right? And if you were to build that capability or not build that capability, what kind of an impact it will create to that particular client base, and will your competition sneak in, right? So a large part of this is again data driven, right?
Right.
But having that level of thought process, it is extremely important to have a framework around that to be able to prioritize your capabilities that you will build, right? Versus the competition has 20 features, I'll also build 20 features, right? Then you are same.
Exactly. You
Right.
become undifferentiated.
Right. So thinking through, with very specific data, very, targeted towards your client base, targeted towards your differentiation that you want to create, and then, prioritizing, a set of features that will create an impact in the product is extremely critical, and the best way to do it, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I'll take just one more question. We will soon be out of time. So one from Shashikant that says, how do we differentiate between making decisions with data or going by experience and gut, right? So how do you go with instinct? So I'd say it's a fine blend of the two. It depends on a lot of things, including the industry that you're in. If it's the industry that you're in, the regulatory and external environment, the maturity of the company, that organization that you're currently in. And here we're speaking about GCCs, so they're fairly mature in larger organizations, right? But as in general, for example, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you might have been thinking about something to do with crypto, right? Or you might have been thinking about something to do with the metaverse. Look what's happened to that now, right? So there could be external changes that happen. Whether you go with data or you go with gut, there could be external shocks that bring your that put your entire business model at risk. Now, specific to making decisions between data and using experience or gut, it's a fine balance. I would say try to discover problems with data. So data will tell you that people are landing on my login page, but they are not going forward, or they're going forward, but then they're not using my product more than 2 minutes, right? And then do customer interviews, or you go by experience or gut to figure out, hey, what is happening there, and what should we fix, what should we try, what experiments should we try. That often is not available through data. What doesn't exist, data can't tell you. Data can only tell you that, hey, this exists and it looks like there's a problem at this step, right? Any thoughts on that, Rajeev?
No, I think you covered it well. I don't have anything else to add over there. I think it's a fine balance, like what you mentioned. And data should support. We have the opportunity to actually collect as much data as we would like.
Right.
There is abundant number of tools, so we should definitely leverage that. But it is not always that you would find the insights just from data, right? So I think it's a fine balance, and I agree with you that we have to combine both in that case. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think thank you so much for the session, gentlemen. Rajeev and Nripendra, I enjoyed the session a lot. I hope our viewers did as well. There are some other questions based on prioritization, especially based on pushback, vitamin N, as you said. How do you push back to senior clients and stakeholders, or important clients who come and say, hey, I need this and I need it yesterday? How do you have a sane conversation with them saying, hey, why is this so important? Can we defer it to next month? How do you prioritize this versus something else that you asked me last week? Do you want me to drop that and pick this up instead? So those kind of conversations, very long, very complex and detailed conversations that we could continue having. We are out of time. So thank you very much, participants. Thank you very much, the panel members, and thank you very much, NASSCOM, for hosting this. I will hand the session over to Shruti for some closing remarks, and wish you all.
So thank you, Rajeev, Nripendra, and Arun, for your valuable insight and expertise during today's webinar. So your contribution have truly enrich our session. And, we appreciate your time and effort for sharing you with us. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Great.
you.
It's a
See you later.
Thank
great
you,
comment
everyone.
from Guru Pingle on the chat saying that this is the epitome of product management, prioritization of the questions. There are so many of them. We all try
So
to
many.
prioritize right on the fly. So I'm happy to engage with all of you. If there's anything, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and we can also have some conversations there. Yeah. Happy to
Yeah.
be here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
And
Thank
see
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.